Sony announced they're raising the price of the PS5 by $50.
Sony just raised the price of the PS5.
The Xbox is increasing its price because of the tariffs. This means all of its physical products, including consoles, accessories, games, will be more expensive.
Ever since the first console generation, prices always dropped as the console got older, so people who didn't have the financial means to buy it on launch could enjoy gaming in the upcoming years. Now fast forward to 2025 and Sony and Microsoft are raising the prices of the PS5 and the Series X 5 years later. In 2020, the prices of the PS5 were as follows: $500 for the base version, $400 for the digital, and $700 for the Pro version. Now the prices of the same console in 2025 are $550 for the base one, $500 for the digital, and $750 for the Pro version. And the same pattern happened with the Series X. According to Sony, the reason for this increase is due to, and I quote, a challenging economic environment, especially US tariffs affecting production costs in manufacturing regions like China, Japan, and Vietnam. This is not new, as this already happened in April in a lot of European countries, where they also experienced a price hike. The only redeeming quality for PlayStation is that they kept everything else the same, while Microsoft increased the prices for accessories as well, such as controllers for example. This is a new phenomenon that never happened in the gaming industry before. For reference, the PS2 went from $300 to $200 in 3 years. The PS4 launched at $400 and then dropped to $300 within 4 years, as well as the Xbox, who went from $400 to $300 after a couple of years. So is it really tariffs that are affecting this new pattern, or is it more than that? I'm not denying that tariffs and inflation play a significant role in this increase. Raw materials such as chips, metals, and plastics, and shipping have all gone up since 2020. In addition, the recent US tariffs on electronics made production in Asia more costly. So Sony and Microsoft pass that cost on to customers. They're a business at the end of the day, so making money will always be their priority no matter who pays. Another reason I believe this increase is happening is the fact that the current console cycle is in its middle. Usually when consoles dropped in prices, it was while a new console was being developed. But today, building a new gen console feels really impossible. In the past, the technological leap between the consoles was massive. Going from the PS1 to the PS2 or from the PS2 to the PS3 genuinely felt like a new gaming generation. However, when you compare the PS4 to the PS5, it doesn't feel like much has changed. You can still play a lot of the PS5 games on the PS4, even though the console is 12 years old. And that's why this generation feels like it never really happened. Because we didn't feel a shift, it was more like changing a graphics card so that you can have a better resolution while playing the same games. And I believe that it could be even more difficult to transition from the PS5 to the PS6 and justify it unless AI makes some incredible leap and we get some insane technological boost. Another major reason I believe companies don't care as much about people buying consoles is the fact that most of the money comes from subscriptions and digital ecosystems. Long gone are the days where you would buy a digital disc and go home and insert it and just enjoy the full game right away. Nowadays, a lot of people have an Xbox Game Pass or the Sony PS Plus, which is far more profitable than console sales and are fully digital rather than manufacturing new consoles. Since they're not desperate to get cheap consoles into every home because subscriptions are for the long term, they feel more free to raise the hardware prices. In the past, companies mainly made money through game sales, physical copies around $60 each, licensing fees as publishers pay Sony and Microsoft royalties per game sold, and accessories such as controllers and headsets. That meant hardware prices had to be kept as low as possible to flood homes with consoles, which guaranteed a captive market for game sales. However, with the new model where the ecosystem is more important than the hardware, Sony and Microsoft are mostly interested in keeping you in their ecosystem. And it's not necessarily hoarding their cheapest box because digital games equal higher profit. When you buy a game digitally, Sony and Microsoft take 30% without having any physical distribution costs. They want you buying digital, which is why the PS5 digital edition exists, and why discs are being phased out. It makes more while costing less. As for subscriptions, it's simple as it means recurring revenue. By using Netflix-style subscriptions, they hook you psychologically. Although you're paying $10 a month, meaning $120 a year, your brain mostly goes, oh, it's only $10, and subscriptions feel cheap in the moment. But over time, you pay far more than you realize. For example, a $15 monthly Game Pass subscription is $180 a year, which is $900 over 5 years, and that's more than buying a console plus 10 new games. But because it's broken into monthly payments, people underestimate the costs. This is a topic on its own and I will talk about it in detail in another video. But to get back on track, these subscriptions give the likes of Sony and Microsoft predictable high margin income, unlike the one-time $60 sales. And if you stay subscribed for a year, that's $120 to $200, which is more than the profit that they would make if you bought 3 games. On top of that, cloud gaming and remote play is slowly rising. Microsoft especially is betting on the cloud, which makes acquiring hardware optional. If you can stream Xbox games on the phone, PC, or TV, then Xbox doesn't need to sell you a cheap console anymore. But there are first-party game ecosystems. Microsoft buying Bethesda and Activision Blizzard give their Game Pass a big value growth, while Sony pushes its PlayStation Studios exclusives to lock players in. Therefore, the Games Plus services are now the money makers and not the boxes sitting in your living room, which naturally leads to price increases. They don't need cheap entry anymore. If fewer people buy hardware, it's fine, because those who do are highly engaged and will spend more on digital games and subscriptions. As long as demand is steady and subscriptions revenue grows, consoles can stay or even get more expensive with time. And obviously the ones who suffer the consequences of all of this are us, the customers, because these consoles become inaccessible for the casual gamer, or the ones who struggle financially because they don't have the cheaper option that comes with age anymore. The more we buy these subscriptions, the more use we get to them, and the more convenient they get, the more difficult it is to leave them. The less incentive we give them, the less incentive we give these companies to lower their prices. While customers suffer, some of them are also to blame. When the PS5 went through a big shortage, people started reselling them for $800 and $900, and people jumped on those prices, which Sony took as a sign that the breaking point has not been reached yet, so they can afford to raise the price a bit more. And that's the reality of capitalism today. And I'm not blaming capitalism for these prices, by the way, but the humans behind these businesses making these decisions are. In a time where having empathy and caring about other people is considered a weakness, how can we ever progress as a society? There has never been such a high level of selfishness and individualism, and while I understand businesses are here to make money, where does it stop? Where does someone say it's enough? If you're making millions, if not billions every year and are highly profitable, why do you feel the need to drain even more money from people who can barely survive? And the worst part is that it's only getting worse every day. It's not happening only in video games, but in every single industry. And if it keeps going like this, we might reach a breaking point. I don't want to end this video on a negative point because there are great people out there and even the majority of the population. However, it always seems like the biggest scum always reach the highest positions because they're not affected by stabbing other people in the back to get to their goal. And while it can feel discouraging, it also reminds us of how important it is to hold these systems and people accountable, and to support those who lead with integrity and empathy. Change doesn't happen overnight, but progress starts when we demand fairness, kindness, and responsibility. Not just from corporations, but from ourselves as a society. Maybe the real hope lies in those who refuse to compromise their humanity for profit, and in our collective power to create a world where success isn't measured by how much you take, but by how much you contribute. Thank you for watching.